Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io, and I'm here today with Danielle Kayembe, the CEO of Grayfire. Good afternoon in your case, Danielle. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Absolutely. So I'm currently the CEO of Grayfire. We're focused on women and impact and technology, and we do work in emerging markets, supporting underrepresented founders in emerging markets, as well as supporting underrepresented founders in the United States, and connecting them to venture capital. And we also work with VC to help them build pipelines of underrepresented founders.
Wow, that's very impressive. So what has been your experience with remote employment, both as a remote employee and a remote employer?
Well, it's actually been quite long, because a lot of the work that I do, I've been working, building Grayfire for the last 6 or 7 years, and a lot of the work that we do is with founders in different countries. So, Africa, as you know, has 54 countries, and so you can't always hop on a flight and be anywhere right away. So, remote work has always been a big part of what we do. Because I've had to manage teams in different countries and different time zones. So it's been a big part of the way that I've built my startup, and the way that I manage my business. And I think now it's become a part of how we all do business.
Mm-hmm.
So this is. I think it's a welcome change, but it's one that I'm absolutely used to.
Yeah, myself too. So what has been your takeaway from these experiences?
Working with, I think that it's, you mean working remotely, I guess you're
Yes.
asking?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, working remotely, you have so much more flexibility in terms of, the speed at which you're able to do things. I think that it also drives good communication,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to communicate early and often in order for work to be effective, and for the team to have direction and purpose. So I think that it fosters good habits, and you can also tell very quickly if something isn't working or things aren't
Mm-hmm.
moving well from week to week. So I think it quite honestly makes you a better leader and a better operator, to be able to work remotely.
Yeah, I would agree. So, what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think could be done differently to make it more effective?
The future of remote employment. I mean, I think that future is here now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that there's what we're seeing right now with what's happening with COVID. So many companies have adapted remote employment as the norm, and it was something that was a perk for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, and now you can see that it's become the norm across almost every type of business. It's not practical for people to fly right now. It's not practical for people to go into the office, and I think that what we'll most likely see is that these patterns will continue. So I think that, we'll probably start to, see more technologies that support remote work,
Mm-hmm.
start to come to market, and people will be looking for, more capabilities to allow, video conferencing and, remote conferences, remote offerings, ways to monetize this differently, ways to reach their customers, as well as just hold business meetings. So I think if you go online, you go on social media right now, you see a lot of people really turning remote work and into a business opportunity in a lot of new ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's really going to be a growth in this space in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. I think actually once the lockdown is lifted, I think you're going to see everybody happily go back to the office. But after about a week, people are going to say, "I kind of like not dealing with traffic every day."
Right. Yeah. Listen, if you, especially those like, like you in the Bay Area, why
Yeah,
would you want to go back to, 90 minutes of traffic a day if you don't have to?
more than 90 minutes. If you commute, you count both ways, it's more than 90 minutes in general.
I don't miss it at all.
I know. So what is the story behind Greyfire and what's the journey been like?
Yeah. Well, so I actually started out early in my career as an investment banker, and
Hmm.
I burned out as
Hmm.
you do when you're working, 18-hour days.
Hmm.
And I was doing work internationally, and I got really interested in the intersection of impact and business. And I wanted to see if there are ways I could apply my skills in business to create an impact in the world. And when I looked across all the major global problems, they all had solution sets. But the common denominator across all of them was actually empowering women. And that was the one universal for creating long-term change on any global problem. And so I said, how hard can it be? I'll just go, I'll just go work on empowering women. No big
Yeah.
deal. Uh, and so I started doing that. I started creating, projects that had kind of triple bottom line, that had took the communities that we worked with into account, the broad investment into communities in Africa, and finding entrepreneurs whose projects also had, positive benefits on the communities that they were in and the women that they worked with. And as I started to do this, I started to get really inspired because I realized that what I was seeing was a new type of business model that I hadn't seen before.
Hmm.
And so a couple of years ago, I wrote this white paper called The Silent Rise of the Female Driven Economy. And the idea is really simple. The idea is that we live in this world that's been designed for men, and we don't think about that.
Hmm.
And so there are things like, when you go in and out of a building as a woman, doors are actually heavy because they're designed for the tensile strength of an average sized man.
Hmm.
So if you're not 6 feet tall and 200 pounds,
Hmm.
like me, I'm about 5'4".
Hmm.
So, I've had to use my full body weight to open revolving doors in cities before. And then so a door is one really simple example. And then you have things like cell phones. So cell phones are designed for men to use one-handed and fit in their pockets. The result is that, because women's hands are actually about 2 centimeters smaller, we drop our phones, we break them more. I'm sure you've noticed that women have these rings and knobs and hooks on the backs of their phones.
Hmm.
So that actually is to make it more comfortable for us to use them because
Hmm.
they're a size too large. So those are really simple examples, but then that bleeds over into everything from things like technology, health apps, AI, virtual reality, the design of cities, the design of everyday products. And so what I realized was that I was seeing trends where women were actually designing products and services that met women's needs. And so, because if you're walking around all the time using these products that aren't designed for you, you're experiencing pain points,
Hmm.
and each one of those pain points is actually a business opportunity. And so that's what I call women-centered innovation, is this rise of companies like Honest Company by Jessica Alba, or Stitch Fix, Glossier, um, Thinks is another one. So all of these companies where women have taken a pain point that they experience from day to day as they walk through life, and they've actually built that into and scaled it into a major business. So that's really become, my big interest, is how do we, as women, identify these opportunities and turn them into business opportunities.
Oh, very interesting. So with the rising pandemic, it's created a lot of roadblocks and challenges for companies. So can you speak, has there been any unique challenges you think from the female perspective from this?
Um, that's a very interesting question.
Hmm.
I know that, I think that what the pandemic has done is that it's brought to the surface a lot of challenges that already existed.
Hmm.
And it's surfaced them in a way, so hopefully so that they can be addressed. And so what you see, is, I think, for teams that are working from home, for example, men and women, if both partners are working, are now suddenly having to share childcare duties and housekeeping duties. And so I think there's definitely been, um, you know, a bit of a revelation probably for a lot of people of like, oh, well, how hard can it be to manage a house or to teach, a couple of 6-year-olds to do math. So I think that there's, in some ways, I think a learning curve there where people are starting to realize how difficult it is to be a mom or to be a working mom. And then I think in other areas, when I speak to a lot of the female entrepreneurs that I know, I'm not sure if you know this statistic, but women only receive 2% of venture capital funding.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Women receive 2%. And so they're already pretty squeezed in terms of having access to capital.
Mm.
And so, now in this environment with business the way it is, it's forced a lot of female founded companies into a very difficult position with, less access to resources as everyone's experiencing, but they're, I think, especially hard hit. So um, I think it's bringing up a lot of issues, and I think the solutions that come out of this will hopefully help to create real lasting change.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up working moms, and I'll tell you a little story. I had a podcast with a woman yesterday, and she goes, the COVID really hasn't had a big effect on me because I'm a working mom, and working moms are used to juggling family and career, right?
Yeah,
The only
yeah.
difference was she wasn't going into an office as much, right?
No, I think that's absolutely true. And I see that with, with my colleagues as well as, other entrepreneurs that I'm seeing, and I'm hearing them say the same thing, right? So
Mhm.
this is already, in a lot of ways, it's the new norm, but I
Mhm.
think it is, forcing them to juggle things in a new way. But I think it's something that we're now, more aware of, and partners are more aware of, because now they're at home as well and
Mhm.
trying to work. And, so now they're experiencing what it's like to be a working mom too.
Or a working dad in that case.
Yeah. Working parents.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now
working parents.
everyone. Yeah. We're all in it now.
Yeah, so there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups who you obviously deal a lot with. How important do you think it will be in the future for these startups to find quality people and in a hurry?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think there's a lot of research out there about the gap that
Hmm.
already exists in terms of, uh, having the right employees. Um, I think there's a huge gap when it comes to recruitment already, and I think that's a big issue in Silicon Valley.
Hmm.
And we're seeing it across a lot of industries. I think that the challenge with startups is that, you are growing and pivoting constantly. You're
Hmm.
building your business model, you're iterating constantly, and you need people who can step in quickly and hit the ground running without too much disruption to the flow of work that you're doing. And I think, finding high quality people quickly right now, it's a hit or miss, right? You go through your friends, you go through you go through your own network, right? We've all
Hmm.
done it.
Typical
You send
startup.
out Yeah, you send out the mass emails, you
Hmm.
post something on LinkedIn, and you kind of cross your fingers and pray
Hmm.
and see what you get. So I think that you know those challenges are only going to accelerate over the next few years. And I think it's going to only become more competitive as well. Yeah.
And just, asking you about your experience in Africa, what is the talent pool like in different parts of Africa?
Well, the talent pool is actually pretty incredible. If you take a step back and you look at Africa versus a lot of other regions of the world,
Mm-hmm.
you actually have the highest percentage of people under the age of 30.
Mm,
So Africa, yeah. So versus, if you look at the Americas, you look at Europe, a few places in Asia like Japan, you have larger percentages of the population that are, ages 50 or above
mm-hmm.
versus under. So Africa is positioned to be one of the largest sources of labor, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for the future. And it's an incredibly well-educated population, increasingly urban.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had some incredible startups that are focused on training and skilling the population there. So what you see is that you have tech and dev um, workers with skill sets that are on par with people you'd find almost anywhere else in the world,
Mm,
and they're working remotely for companies in the US and companies in Europe, and they're doing so from Africa. You've actually had some incredible, some of the largest, I think, fintech IPOs have actually been in Africa in the last few years. So there's actually an incredible amount of talent there.
oh, that's very good. So Danielle, I'd like to thank you for your time today. This has been very fascinating, and I wish you luck in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This was a great conversation.
Yes, it
Thank
was.
you.
Thank you, and have a great day.
All right. Thank you.